Hello again. I'm here with another video. This one's going to be an author spotlight. I'm going to be spotlighting Ania Ahlborn. I have 8 books to cover. 2 of them are novellas. They are Seed, The Bird Eater, The Neighbors, Brother, The Shuddering, Within These Walls, The Devil Crept In, and her 2 novellas, The Pretty Ones and I Call Upon Thee. First off, let me say that I have grown to feel like Ania Ahlborn is probably one of my favorite horror writers in general, and my favorite female horror writer that I've read. She has a knack for doing characterizations, to be honest with you, right up there with Stephen King. I mean, she has very diverse, deep, rich characters. If you are a person who likes characters in books, you can't really go wrong with any of Ania Ahlborn's books. They all are very deep characterizations, and I have really learned to enjoy these books. First one I'm going to cover is Seed. I've already spoken about this book in one of my wrap-ups, I believe. This covers a family, a husband, wife, and 2 children. They have a car accident, and one of the children starts acting strangely. You find out that the father is aware of what's going on, doesn't really want to get into what happened, but it's kind of a mystery of what's going on with this child. The wife is kind of freaking out, and you kind of see this family kind of disintegrate. And it's a really interesting story. I love, again, the characterization she does, and this is definitely a great read if you want to read about basically a possession story, which is what this is. I couldn't really praise it highly enough. That is Seed. Next book I'm going to talk about is Bird Eater. I really enjoyed this story. This is about a person who goes back to a house after a while. He's having some trouble with his family life, and I don't want to get into too many spoilers, but some strange things starting to happen, and he realizes that there might be something more to this house and kind of ghost stories around this house as far as why people stayed away from this house. It has to do with his past, and again, Ania Ahlborn just delves into these characters really good. You see a lot of his past and the way he interacts with some friends of his that he meets. And again, it's a pretty good book. I really enjoyed the characters. I really enjoyed the story. And I kind of like the twist that the story had. And that is Bird Eater. Next one is The Neighbors. This is probably my weakest Ania Ahlborn story. And not because of the characterizations. The characterizations are really good. It's one of those kind of stories where the ending, it just wasn't satisfying enough for me. I kind of thought it might have gone to a different direction. The way they were kind of hinting at where it was going. While I love the characterizations, I was a little weak on the ending. Still, basically, the story of Neighbors is about this person, Drew, who moves into his childhood friend's home after taking care of his alcoholic mother and just needs a break, goes into his other friend's home. And there are neighbors next door, and there's this woman neighbor, married couple next door, and there's this woman neighbor who he kind of gets enamored by, and it's basically kind of evil neighbors story. A little bit of seduction in there, and again, the characterizations are great. I love the characterizations. I love the story. I love Drew's character. I love his friend's character. I love the characters of the neighbors. They both were really good, but I really wasn't kind of satisfied with where it was going as far as near the end. So this is probably my weakest Ania Ahlborn story that I've read. Still think the characterizations are great, but the ending kind of left me a little flat because I expected it to be a little bit more than what it was, I guess. Next book is Brother. This is the story of the Morrow family. They are basically West Virginia hick type of killers. I mean, you could see this on any kind of like Rob Zombie movie. I've already talked about this book as well. The real powerfulness of this book is the characterizations. The character of Michael Morrow and his brother Rebel, and the interaction between him and his brother and this girl that he finds in town that he starts having a relationship with called Alice. And it's really good as far as like just a psychological way that Michael has to deal with this killer family and what's going on in the house, and you find out about his past with slow little flashbacks, and again, a lot of twists and turns in this book, and it was pretty good. I really liked it. I didn't think it was a bad book. You know, in more retrospect, I think I gave it probably a lower grade on my last review, but when I thought back more about it, I said it was actually a pretty good book, and I really enjoyed it. That was Brother. Next one was another book I reviewed, Within These Walls. This has kind of got a similar theme to The Bird Eater, where a person goes into a house, but instead of going into a childhood house, he goes into a house of a cult leader because he's a crime writer trying to get his life back together. His marriage is on the rocks, and he brings his daughter along, trying to reconnect with her. This house is notorious for what this cult leader did in this house, some grisly murder that happened in this house, and you start seeing some kind of basically a haunted house story. You see how this cult leader is manipulating him, manipulates other people around him, and again, this is told in a lot of flashbacks and a lot of things of how this happened. Characterizations, again, are really great. I enjoyed this book. Now, my favorite Ania Ahlborn, I'll get to that that later, but still a pretty good book, and I can't say enough about Ania Ahlborn. Any of these books that you've read, you probably would like. That is Within These Walls. Next book I'm going to talk about is just Shuddering. This book I'm going to tell you straight out is a werewolf story. A book about werewolves. And what's really cool about this is, again, characters are stuck in this ski resort and basically attacked by werewolves. I mean, that's the simple plot of the story. Like all of Ania Ahlborn stories, these characters are rich and depthful and have a lot of different things going on, and you really get interested in these characters. But what's really cool is that werewolves are just pretty much werewolves. She doesn't really explain much about them. She doesn't really explain their origins. They're just this menacing force. You know what they are pretty much right away. It's just a tension-filled story about people trapped in an area with something out to kill them. It is one of my favorites, actually. This is actually one of my favorite Ania Ahlborn stories because it is just so basic. And when you take such a basic story and you put some really good character development layers over it, it just becomes a great story. So that is The Shuddering. I read both of these on ebook. They actually are binded in a new book that she has out that has these two novellas binded in, but I'm going to just review these separately. The first Ania Ahlborn novella I want to talk about is Pretty Ones. This is about Nell Sullivan. She is basically a plain Jane who has a lot of trouble finding friends and trying to keep friends. And when she does make one friend, this person mysteriously dies. And because the time period is 1977, they blame it on Son of Sam, but she believes it's something more sinister. And the nice thing about the story is I kind of knew where it was going. This is probably, in my mind, the most predictable Ania Ahlborn book that I read because I knew the twist way ahead of time. I think I knew the twist like within the first 20 pages of this novella. I knew where the twist was going. But again, I still love the characterizations. I still love the way she executed it. And it was still a pretty nice book. And that is The Pretty Ones. Next book I'm going to talk about is I Call Upon Thee. This is another book about a woman who had to go back to a family home because one of her siblings dies and she has to go back to this house and she gets to relive some of these awful memories that she had. And there was something that she did when she was young that you find out influences all this. And it's a really interesting book. Ania Ahlborn actually does a nice little afterward saying that this was probably one of her most personal books, where there are a lot of things that were in this book that actually did happen to her, but not, obviously, not the supernatural elements as much. But this was a really interesting book. Now, again, not one of my favorite Ania Ahlborn stories, but it was enjoyable. Again, it was a short novella, and I really liked it. And the last book I want to talk about is my favorite Ania Ahlborn book, and this is The Devil Crept In. This is about a child named Jude who goes missing, and his best friend Steven tries to search for him because he doesn't believe that the cops and the people around are doing enough to search for him. And you find out this evil thing in the woods is probably responsible for it. I love this book. This is Ania Ahlborn being, to me, as close to Stephen King as she can get as far as having a story with kids at the center of the story. It is so great to see her write these kids' perspectives, how this child deals with what's going on and trying to save his friend. It did have definitely reminiscent of it, and it was just, to me, again, one of her best book. If you're going to read one Ania Ahlborn story, I would definitely pick The Devil Crept In because I think that, again, that is one of her best books. And those are my reviews for all of the Ania Ahlborn books. Hopefully you found her as an author that you can check out, and based on all the stories I picked, you can pick ones that find most interesting. Thanks again for watching, and I hope to see you soon. Bye.